Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with great artist Bad Day. Because everyone has them. Sometimes they have bad weeks. Sometimes they have bad years or bad epochs in their lives. Now, I was going through my CDs, as I always do, just rummaging about to see what's in there. And this thing showed up. This is Newton Classics, which, was this strange little budget thing that licensed really major stuff from major labels. They had a lot of Universal stuff, Polygram stuff, whatever they wanted. Not Polygram, Universal, Decca, Philips, Deutsche Grammophon things. Some of it marvelous, I Musici's Vivaldi, things like that. But they also had this, Colin Davis's Staatskapelle Dresden Beethoven cycle. Now, I've been talking about less than wonderful Beethoven cycles, and as part of this series, I did Riccardo Muti's Beethoven cycle of Philadelphia, which some of you were quick to point out, well, it's not really bad, and it isn't. I know this is called Great Artist Bad Day, and some of the things in this series are truly atrocious, don't get me wrong. But part of the thing here is that when you're dealing with a really fine artist who you really admire, and I think Colin Davis is just a marvelous conductor, less than best is always depressing. It really is. And less than best in Beethoven symphonies is super duper uber depressing, especially when they've done earlier recordings of some of them and you know that they can do them really well. But it all depends on where you are. And Colin Davis was, I hate to go into biography, but he was a conductor who really blew hot and cold. He had, emotional issues throughout his life. There were times when he sort of went into a musical funk. As, for example, most of his life with the Bavarian radio that was recorded for RCA. A lot of those recordings weren't very good. He did that dreadful series of Sibelius recordings with the London Symphony for RCA. A lot of his life on RCA. Well, this was on RCA. At least I'm pretty sure it was, if I recall rightly. Although it may have been an East German recording because it was done in those days. And what was East Germany? What does it say it was licensed from? No, it was Universal International Music. Okay, so it must have been on Philips. Yes, it was on Philips. I'm getting my brain back here. And he did glorious things. First of all, you have the Staatskapelle Dresden, one of my all-time favorite orchestras, especially in Beethoven. They did that fabulous cycle with Herbert Blomstedt. They did glorious Mozart with Colin Davis. My goodness, he had a wonderful relationship with that orchestra. So I had very, very high expectations for this particular set. I really did. And it is beautiful. It's beautifully recorded. The recordings that he made with the Staatskapelle Dresden were really, really gorgeous sonically because they were using the East German engineers. That I'm sure of, 100% sure of. And, because you have Ursula Singer, the recording engineers are, people I've never heard of. So that's always a good sign. Anyway, the bottom line is, it's a dull Beethoven cycle. It's not terribly dull. It's handsomely played, but everything is just a hair under tempo. It's just not exciting. And that's what Colin Davis was like when he was off, because he was a very inspirational conductor. He really was. I saw him live many times, and he could be absolutely thrilling, or he could be absolutely dull as ditch water, depending on what it was. He often sort of lost control of the performance when I used to see them. At least one moment where everything went haywire, but it was amiable. You got, his commitment was always so evident when he was on. And I don't think he was terribly not on for these performances, but they're just underwhelming. That is the word, underwhelming. Your whelm is under. And the problem with this cycle is really very similar, without getting into crazy specifics. It was very similar to the problem with Riccardo Muti's, because Muti homogenized the symphonies. It wasn't that he homogenized the actual textures and all that, but he played them all. Excuse me, I got an itch. He played them all rather the same. And so the result over listening, to the whole series was that there was this very beautiful playing, sort of glommed onto each symphony wantonly, without a lot of differentiation between them. And that's what happens here. Now, Davis did fantastic recordings of the Seventh. He did a great version of
The ninth.
in Bavaria. Was it in Bavaria? I think it was, yeah, Bavarian Radio. And before he was actually regularly there on RCA, it was on Philips. He did some terrific Beethoven. He can do terrific Beethoven. And there's no question about it. But this is just a non-happening set. They're just beautifully played, but somehow monotonous over their length. And that may come partly from also listening to big chunks of them all at once. You know, you recognize the approach, you recognize the orchestra, you recognize the sensibility, but my goodness, you want him to let go, because Davis was a guy who knew how to let go. I mean, heck, he did Berlioz mostly fabulously. He got it. He really got it. Romantic music, too. So, I don't know. I'm keeping it. I keep it for the Staatskapelle Dresden more than anything else. And, you know, was it a terrible Beethoven cycle? No, it's not. It's just not thrilling. And by the way, I remember when it came out, and I remember reading all the original reviews, and they were sort of along those lines. And I said to myself, no, they have to be wrong, because they're critics and they weren't me. You know, so everybody who wasn't me is going to be wrong, and you have to make your own, you know, draw your own conclusions on the basis of actual listening, careful listening. And I bought the set, which was expensive, and I played it, and it was beautiful. And I thought, oh, it's so beautiful. And I remember the beginning of the Eroica, you know, it just sounded so promising, and then it just never woke up. And that's the story of this set. The Eroica, the seventh, the fifth, all the big ones. There are gorgeous features. You know, the most Mozartian of Beethoven's symphonies, the fourth, comes off rather well. But no, it's not a great Beethoven cycle. And it's a pity, because it comes from a great conductor. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.